Hey, I'm Nerdchomp, and I'm making a game called Imago. It's a roguelike 3D platformer where you absorb bug abilities, cocoon bugs to upgrade them, and adapt your strategy when your bugs inevitably die. It is the third day of Imago Week, and if you don't know what Imago Week is, I made a video explaining it on Sunday, so you can watch that first. In this video, I will be talking about the new art style, environment art, and pretty much everything art related that isn't the character, since I already covered the character in my video from yesterday. Imago has already gone one big style change in the past. The original prototype used to use a lot of megascans for a photorealistic look. This was mostly a symptom of time crunch for the competition that this game was a part of. Up until round 2 of the competition, the environment art was very lacking, and it was one of the main criticisms from the judges. So for the final round of the competition, since I didn't have a lot of time to model and texture my own stuff, I pulled some megascans from the Fab store to build a moody atmosphere. But after the competition was over and I decided to keep on working on Imago, I recognized that using megascans would completely overbloat my game with overly high poly meshes. And while Unreal has Nanite to handle these high poly counts, it still affects the size of the project, and it limits the type of assets I can use to what is available on the Fab store. If I need something bespoke, I'd be out of luck, since I can't really model my own photorealistic assets. It was also just messy to fit a mishmash of assets created from different people into one cohesive project. Because of these reasons, about a year ago, I reset the game's style and opted for a simpler cel-shaded look. I'd used a similar look for my now abandoned game Nectar, and I liked how it looked in that game, so I transferred that over into Imago for something more achievable. And while it was okay, a part of me knew I wasn't fully happy with it. It worked for Nectar, but it didn't fully fit my vision for Imago. The prototype was moody and atmospheric, and those things were lost with the new style. The cel-shaded look was achieved in a post-process material, and sometimes I felt like I was fighting against the engine to make the cel shading work correctly. Unreal's main focus is photorealism, and at the time, a lot of hacky things needed to be done to make the cel shading work. With UE 5.8, they have made a native cel shader, which I haven't tried out at all, so maybe it's easier now, but it's still not the spotlight feature of Unreal. I wanted to take advantage of the engine's high-quality global illumination, so I scrapped the art style a second time to start over. My new approach is sort of in between the two old styles. I want less cute and cartoony, and more dark, gloomy, and atmospheric, with muted, desaturated colors. But photorealism is not my goal. Instead, I use low poly models that I can make myself, and then I amplify them with high-quality global illumination and normal maps. Imago will have multiple biomes, but to establish the overall style, I focused on just one biome, the Desert Canyon. I'll get a little more into how I generated these platforms later in the week when I talk about the new level generator, but rather than the hexagonal platforms from the previous style, I now have these set of platform tiles for different situations. I keep these tiles fairly simple. For the platform material, I use world-aligned textures so the seams between the platforms are less noticeable. I use both Material Maker and Blender to create this ground normal map and this tileable Voronoi diagram normal map. That is hard to say. Tileable Voronoi diagram normal map. I blend both of these normal maps together at different scales using Perlin noise as a blending mask. I also use Perlin noise to drive color variation, and I have a gradient from darker to lighter as the platforms get higher. This color variation and gradient make the platforms more interesting to look at, but it also makes the edges of the platforms easier to see. In the game, there are these towers that the player is working towards in each level. I iterated through lots of versions of these towers. It's in the desert, so I took some inspiration from desert watchtowers, specifically this one. I made a sketch, and then my wife refined the concept with a little sketch of her own. And I really liked her sketch a lot, so I used it as a reference to model the tower in Blender. Up until this point, I had not properly UV unwrapped anything. The platforms used world coordinates instead of UV coordinates, so I didn't need to UV unwrap those. UV unwrapping has always been something that I was intimidated by, and I tended to avoid if I could. But I knew it was something I should learn, and it's actually not as hard as I thought it would be. I made this brick normal map in Material Maker and mapped it to the walls of the tower. But the result was a little too busy and too uniform in my opinion, so instead, I blend a version of my platform cliff material into the mix, so it transitions between brick and a weathered stone look. I also made this wood grain texture in Blender, which I use for these supports and planks, and I actually reused this texture for the main character's mask as well. Throughout the game, The player will find these bug eggs as they travel through levels, and these bug eggs will eventually hatch into bugs. The egg model is pretty much just a sphere, but I make them look a little more interesting using textures and shaders. I wanted the eggs to stand out and feel almost otherworldly, so while the environment is mostly muted and desaturated colors, the eggs are vibrant. I use the Voronoi normal map again to give them a textured look, and then I use a Fresnel node to drive the color and fake a bit of translucency. The sides of the egg are an orangey amber color, and then the center is a darker purple shade. I use a noise texture and a panner node for the center color to give the subtle illusion that there is something moving inside. Throughout the levels, there will be these telescopes that allow you to zoom out and gain an overview perspective of the level. I looked up some old references for old telescopes, and then I modeled my own in Blender. I made the legs of the tripod wood, and I used the Voronoi texture to give a dented metal look to some of the metal parts. To give a more moody atmosphere, I added some fog, which also helps sell the large scale of the towers. I've never been a huge fan of the default UE5 sky, so early on I replaced it with an HDRI, which I used for a while. But I found the HDRI approach was a little too limiting. It meant that the sky was static with no cloud movement, and I was stuck with whatever sun position was in the HDRI. I was also stuck with whatever selection of HDRIs were online, most of which are photos of real skies. But I want something a little more dynamic and more stylized, so I removed the HDRI and put my own sky sphere in. I have a color gradient starting from the horizon and moving up, and then I use a combination of panning noise textures to move and morph the clouds, as I went for a stylized nebula look. I use a series of radial gradients within the sky shader to simulate the sun, and I line that up with the directional light. Because it's all driven by parameters in the shader, I can control the position, size, and color of the sun. I can even have custom shapes if I want. I can also change the color of the sky. All of this control lets me change the mood of the level if I need to. And I believe that is all the environment art I've done so far. I'm very happy with this new style. It fits much better with my original intentions. There's still a lot of work to do to fill out these levels and make them feel more interesting, but this is a good start in establishing a solid art style. Tomorrow is day 4 of Imago week, and I will release a video of the structure and story elements of Imago. Some of that has changed. Imago is no longer a deck builder, so tune in tomorrow to learn more about that. The Steam page for Imago is up and active, so you can head over there and wishlist the game. That really helps me out a lot. Link in the description. Thanks.